Hey, it's Matt, your average gamer, and for this video, we're going to be going back to my crafting series. That's right, we're going to take Milady, which is a phenomenal weapon from the DLC, a very much favorited weapon for myself included because of its amazing light moveset, and we're going to learn how to craft different builds with this weapon. And of course, we're going to show you how to make this exact Faith build. That's going to be the first one. We're going to show you how to make a Dexterity Milady build, a Blood Milady build, as well as a Cold Milady build. It's going to be a phenomenal video in terms of information, a lot of information here to go through, and you're going to be able to create your own amazing Milady builds. And I can't wait to get into this one. This is going to be awesome. I love the crafting series. It's really fun to do these. Now, Milady crafting time, we've got a lot to go through here. Let's jump into our Faith stats. First, we're going to build that initial one we just showed off on the bear in the intro there, and we're going to go for 70 Faith because, guess what? We're a Faith build. These are our 150 stats. And as always, you're probably going to get the hang of how this works fairly quickly. We're going to go through everything. We're going to explain how it works and how to build powerful Milady builds. Now, for this, we have it in Flame Art, and we're going to choose Flame Spear. We're picking Flame Art because that will give us fire damage that scales with our Faith stat. That's important here, so that way we can make the most out of our Faith stat, because now the fire damage on the weapon is going to scale with Faith. We're going to get a C in Faith and a D in Dexterity, but we're not going to worry too much about the physical damage part. We're going to go here for our first tier, and that's going to be the Flame tier. We're doing fire damage, so we're going to grab the Flame tier for 20% more fire damage. That seems like an obvious one here. Because of the fact that we're doing fire damage, we want to boost that by the 20%. There are other ones going to be the Thorny tier. Guess what? Milady's light attacks are really fast, so we're going to take advantage of that using the Thorny tier. That's going to give us additional damage on successive hits, which Milady is absolutely capable of. Alright, next up here, we're going to pick our buffs. You could stack one aura and one body buff. Now, for our aura buff, we are going to pick Golden Vow. That's going to give us 15% more attack and defense, and is probably the best cast and forget incantation buff in the entire game. Now, for our body buff, we're going to go with Flame Grant Me Strength here because it gives us 20% more fire and physical damage. It's going to be a little bit better than Howl here. Howl will give you 25% generic damage, but since we're doing fire and physical, Flame Grant Me Strength is going to be better in this spot. Alright, now we're going to show off our Ash of War. We saw it in the intro, so I'm not going to repeat anything there. We're going to go over the rest of this because we got to build talismans and all that stuff as well, too. You can see clearly the whole time here and the animation, this is definitely chargeable, so that means that we can use an extra talisman, the Godfrey icon, because our weapon's chargeable. Alright, now we're going to go over an equipment. We already have our Flame Spear, Milady, and Flame Art scaling with Faith. We have any seal for buffs. It doesn't matter what seal you use for buffs, they're all a flat amount. Let's jump into our first talisman. So our first talisman's pretty obvious. We're going to grab the Shard of Alexander because that's going to boost the weapon art by 15% for us. That's going to be huge here, and that's going to make a big difference on using that weapon art. And the next talisman that we're going to pick for this one is the Godfrey icon, because we already showed that it could be charged. It looks like it's absolutely chargeable. Usually you could tell visually whether or not it's chargeable, so we're going to grab the Godfrey icon for another 15% damage when charged. And now jumping into our third talisman slot. Now, we used the Flame tier before, so why not stack that with the Fire Scorpion charm? We're doing a lot of fire damage with this Ash of War. It adds additional fire damage too, so let's stack this with the Flame tier for a total of 32% more fire damage. Yeah, it's a great one for this spot. I always go with the elemental talismans because they're great there. You take a little bit of increased incoming damage when using them, but they're always worth it for the most part if you're doing elemental damage because it's 12% more. Now for the final talisman slot, this is kind of a flex spot, but I'm going to go with the two-handed sword talisman. It's not really going to increase our Ash of War or anything like that, but it will allow us to two-hand and get more damage out of our regular hits. Now, for the buffing order, we're going to drink our tier first, because that lasts the longest, around 3 minutes. Then Golden Vow, which is about 2 minutes in length. And then lastly, we're going to use Flame Grant Me Strength, which is only 30 seconds. And then you can see on screen here, there it is, the awesome Ash of War. I like Flame Spear. Some people like Flame Skewer better, but for me, Flame Spear is a lot of fun. It's chargeable. It does a lot of posture damage too, as you saw with the Rune Bear. And we are going to go into our next one here, which is Dexterity. And check out these stats. These are Rune level 150 stats. We have 70 Dexterity. We managed to have 60 Vigor too, and a good amount of Endurance. These are going to be our Dexterity stats, and we are going to craft a really good Dexterity Milady build. And now for our Dexterity Milady build. Elden Ring's been really fun, by the way. I'm going to show this without buffs real quick. This is no buffs or talismans whatsoever, how much damage we can do. We're going to do a comparison for this one, and you're going to see the difference. There's a huge difference between the two, by the way. But this is nothing at all we have in our equipment other than Milady itself, and we're going to see how the damage is. And I want to mention, I was just going to say this, but I started talking about not using buffs. Elden Ring Shadow the Erdtree, the more I play it, the more I enjoy it. It just seems to be that way for me. I can't say the same for the base game, because the base game kind of caught me right away, but there was some things I kind of picked at with Shadow the Erdtree, but the more I've been playing it, experimenting with the different weapons, the more fun I've been having. So if you're having a hard time, be sure to stick it out, because it really is an enjoyable DLC. There's a lot to like and a lot of great bosses. Now for this, we're going to go with Wing Stance, and we're going to go for Keen Affinity, because that's going to have direct Dexterity scaling. It's going to give us a B in Dexterity, and it's going to make use of our 150 stats. And you know how this works already. We're going to go and build it into an awesome Wing Stance build in Keen Affinity, where we're going to get a lot of damage out of this one. Now, we want to use the Faith here because we want to be able to use buffs, and we don't have to worry about investing too much in Faith. So that's going to be one slot right there so that we can do our buffs that we like. And then, for our other Talisman slot, we are going to pick the Thorny tier because, guess what? Milady's fast. This is kind of going to be a theme here, but this is an excellent tier to have for Milady, especially for your light attacks. For a greatsword, it's incredibly quick. I did just mention this, but as far as your thoughts go, if you want to see one of these for the Fire Knight's Greatsword as well, be sure to comment below. I'm curious on your thoughts. Now for our buffs, same thing. You can stack one aura and body buff. I really like Golden Vow, so that's going to be our aura buff. And then for our body buff, we are going to go with Flame Grant Me Strength. Now you could use Blood Boil too, that's a really good one as well, but it is a consumable, a little bit difficult to farm for on console with limited items. Hellish Rebiri works too, but we don't quite have the faith for it, so we're going to go with Flame Grant Me Strength. And you know what we're going to jump into here? We're going to jump into showing you how to use your talismans to great effect to make it into a very damaging build. And we have Keen Milady with Wing Stance, any seal for buffs. You can use the full Rakshasa set if you want to for... It's going to give you low armor, but you get an additional 8% damage. For our first talisman here, we're going to go with the usual. That's going to be the Shard of Alexander, probably the best talisman in the game to boost the weapon art by 15%. That's going to be hugely beneficial for us being able to boost that weapon art because it already does pretty good damage, and now we have the Shard of Alexander. The next one here for our talisman slot number 2. And I did a lot of thinking on this one in terms of damage because there's a lot you could do here, but I like R'Lana's cameo because we have a stance. Wing Stance is obviously a stance type Ash of War, so it's going to give us a damage boost when we're using this new talisman, R'Lana's cameo, which is going to end up being perfect in this spot. Now we're going to go to our third talisman slot as we continue to build a really powerful dexterity build. And for this one, we are going to end up picking Millicent's Prosthesis. We've got a couple options here, but I like the additional dexterity and successive attack power. Ritual Swords Talisman and Rotten Wing Sword Insignia are other good options. However, for our fourth slot, this is going to be kind of like a flex spot again, where you can kind of put any talisman you want in this slot because you're going to get great damage at this point so far of what we have anyways. Now, for the fourth talisman slot, if you're using Millicent's Prosthesis, you could use Wing Sword Insignia or Rotten Wing Sword Insignia with it and stack the successive attack power, which will ultimately just give you more damage. But that last slot is very much a flex spot, so feel free to put whatever you want in there. If you want to do Dragon Crest for some defense, that's another great option for you as well. And of course, we already showed we have the Thorny tier and Faith tier. Let's talk about buffs. Once again, drink the longest duration first, so we're going to go with the tier because that's around 3 minutes. Then we're going to use Golden Vow, which is close to 2 minutes in length, and then we're going to use Flame Grant Me Strength last. Make sure you fill up your FP afterwards. Alright, let's show off this build. Now that we have all of our buffs, all of our talismans, let's see how much damage we could do. Okay, so right from the start, we're able to stack 5,000 damage. That's a big improvement from the first time. And then our charged version of the Wing Stance does around 2,500 damage, 3,300 right there, so that was pretty impressive. All in all, it ended up working out quite well. You can see the difference is huge with talismans and buffs. As you continue to learn how to build around this weapon, you can turn it into something amazing. Let's jump into our cold build for Milady. And these are our cold sets right on screen. We have 60 Vigor, 24 Mind, 26 Endurance, 40 Dexterity, and 40 Intelligence. We split that based on the cold scaling for Milady, and we have 15 Faith. Alright, let's check out Milady cold with no buffs whatsoever. We're going to do a comparison with this one again to give you guys an idea of how much damage this does before and after. So a little bit of a comparison here. No buffs or talismans, and the Stomp isn't too bad overall. It does build up Frost relatively quick. We're using Divine Beast Stomp. which is a really cool Ash of War, quite literally, but it does build up on Frost quickly. The scaling we're going to talk about is a little bit complex with this one. Kind of acts sort of like Ice Spear in the sense that it has scaling from both your intelligence and your dexterity stat. But overall, even without buffs, this isn't too bad. You can see how long I'm holding my foot up there, by the way, that it's definitely chargeable. We can hold it down longer. It is a chargeable skill. A lot of times you can tell, like I mentioned earlier, when something's chargeable. See how long that is? We could either use this quick or charge it, hold it down for more damage. But overall, even without buffs or talismans, I was actually pretty impressed. This is definitely an improvement over Hoarfrost Stomp, especially after it got nerfed like crazy. But let's jump into building around this, making a powerful Divine Beast Stomp build. And as you may know, we're going to go with the same Ash of War that we're using, of course, and that's going to be Divine Beast Frost Stomp. You get that from beating Divine Beast. And then we're going to go with Cold Affinity for both intelligence and dexterity scaling because we split our stats up to fit that perfectly. And next up here for our tiers, let's check out our tiers. First thing I want to grab is the magic tier because we're doing magic damage on this Ash of War. It's very clearly magic damage, so we're going to boost that. And then we're going to use the faith tier as well so we could do our normal buffs. That's obviously one I like a lot because that means we could use Golden Bow Incantation. And once again, an aura and a body buff. For our aura buff, we're going to go with Golden Vow once again. 15% more attack and defense for around 2 minutes. That's going to be perfect for us. For our body buff, we're going to pick Flame Grant Me Strength. That's going to boost our regular hits by 20% for the additional 20% physical damage. And there we have it, our buffs right there. We got our tiers. We're almost ready to go, except we need talismans for this build. So there it is, the Cold Milady right there. We have any seal for buffs. You can check out the same armor set we've been running. We hit 51 poise, which is the first poise threshold. And we're going to pick the Shard of Alexander to boost the weapon art again. And it'll boost it by 15%. Now for our second talisman slot, this is actually going to turn into a really good build because there's a lot we can boost stuff with. We're going to use the Godfrey icon because this is chargeable. You could hold it down and charge it longer. The Godfrey icon will boost it by 15%. And for our third talisman slot, since we're doing magic damage and we have the magic tier, let's stack that with the magic scorpion charm. 32% more magic damage. That sounds pretty good right there. We're going to grab and use the magic scorpion charm. Now for the fourth slot, we are going to use the Shattered Stone Talisman. This is new and it will boost stomping skills, which is exactly what we're doing, so that's going to be perfect here. And I meant 32% because we're going to stack that with the magic tier. Always stack your elementals. A Scorpion Charm and a tier is going to give you 32% of whatever element you're doing. Let's check this out. And we're going to start with our buffs, of course. We're going to drink the tier because it's the longest duration. Same buffing order for the most part. We're using Golden Vow, and then we're going to use Flame Grant Me Strength last. After of which, make sure you fill up your FP so we could use our Ash of War a lot because that's going to be really powerful with a build like this one. Now, I wish this Ash of War had a little bit more range. If there's one thing I could pick out, it's that. But overall, the frost buildup, the damage, it's pretty solid. I mean, right there, if you could hit the whole dragon with it, it's around 1500 damage or so. Not bad at all. Couple stomps, maybe 5 or so, and you could take down this dragon. And the dragon goes down. We're going to take on this other dragon to see how this build does with this dragon, because we're going to use regular hits with the weapons mixed in here too to kind of fit the build. So we're going to use the stomp initially, and let's go in for some regular Milady hits. Milady has a really amazing moveset, of course, really fast, can definitely build up on successive hits, and has good AR too. For those that don't know what AR means, that's attack rating in Elden Ring. It's your attack rating as a whole on your weapon. Let's jump into our blood build now. And for the blood build, we've split our stats because Arcane's got to give us our bleed scaling. So we have 45 Arcane, 40 Dexterity, and we have 60 Vigor. Alright, now for our blood build, we're going to try a Blood Milady build out. So let's check this out. I added some different music for this one. We're going to see how this does without any buffs or talismans. Let's check this out and see how this does. Yeah, we could do a lot better than this. This isn't a lot of damage so far, although we did end up proccing Rot on Margit rather, so that was a plus. Yeah, so the Rot proccing is not going to change. Our buffs isn't going to change how many times it is. Most likely 3 hits again, he'll proc Rot, or probably be about the same based on resistances. Alright, so we're going to check this out. We're going to use Milady in Blood Affinity with Poison Flower Blooms Twice, a new Ash of War in Shadow of the Erdtree. Alright, and now what are we going to do for our tiers? Well, you kind of already have an idea of our first tier for this one. Thorny tier again, because we're hitting stuff quickly. So we want to use that Thorny tier as long as we're using that amazing light greatsword moveset. It fits perfectly for this weapon. So that was kind of a must-have for us. And then we're going to use the Faith tier again because I want to use buffs again. That makes Elden Ring a little bit easier, and we all know the DLC could be pretty difficult at this point, so the buffs are going to help us. Let's jump into those right now. For our aura buff, we're going to pick Golden Vow. And that's going to give us 15% more attack and defense, once again, for anybody that's using these time-stamped. And then we're going to go over which body buff. We're going to pick Flame Grant Me Strength, of course, because that's going to give us 20% more physical damage. And it's also really low in terms of faith requirements. You only need 15 faith to use it. All right, now we're going to jump into Talismans and everything you need to know. By the way, the white mask will add 10% more damage. I just didn't have it on this character. We have Milady in Blood with Poison Flower Blooms twice. We have Any Seal for buffs. Rakshasa set will also boost your damage. Let's jump into the first Talisman, which we're going to use, the Shard of Alexander. Yeah, it's always going to boost the weapon skill. Plus, I wanted to keep all of this relatively easy to understand. The Shard of Alexander is hands down the best talisman in the game. There's no question about it. The next one we're going to pick here is Kindred of Rot's Exaltation, because guess what? That's going to boost our damage after we proc Rot with the Astral War. And then we're going to use Lord of Blood's Exaltation because guess what? We're going to be doing bleed with the regular hits on the weapon, of course, so we want to have that. Every time we proc bleed, we're going to have 20% more damage, and that's generic damage that applies to everything, so that's awesome. Once you proc bleed, 20 seconds, you got more damage. Next up here, we're going to use Melissa's Prosthesis for more dexterity and successive attack damage. Also, I want to say real quick, I hope you're enjoying this crafting video. If you want to see one for the Fire Knight's Greatsword, I mentioned that earlier, be sure to comment below. If you want to see more crafting videos like this one on how to build your own stuff in terms of Elden Ring and Shadow of the Erdtree, let me know. I think it makes the DLC more enjoyable too, if you can make your own builds and whatnot. I prefer to share my knowledge too. I like sharing stuff in terms of this because it's a lot of fun to go over this stuff and kind of how build crafting works. We used our tier there, of course, longest duration first, Golden Vow, then Flame Grant Me Strength. Then we filled up our FP. Now we used Margit Shackle, which is an item that could stun both Margit and Morgott. Moog has one too. If you've never grabbed those, be sure to grab them because they're super helpful in these fights. And of course, once we procced Rot, he's taken a lot of damage there. And we have Kindred of Rot's Exaltation. You can see the icons in the top left-hand corner. You can see that it's now active. After we proc bleed here in 1 second, you're going to see that that's active too. So Kindred of Rot's Exaltation is active. Lord of Blood's Exaltation is active as well. We're getting a lot of damage from those boosts. Yeah, those icons in the top left will give you an idea of how many buffs and everything you have going on. We got a lot up there with this build, but we're able to get a good amount of damage out of it. Proc, Rot, Bleed, everything as far as that goes. Let's jump into Great Talismans. And once for this one that you're going to want to grab a Shard of Alexander, Elemental Scorpion Charms, Melissa's Prosthesis, Rotten Winged or Wingsword Insignia, Rolana's Cameo, Lord of Blood's Exaltation or Kindred of Rot's Exaltation, Ritual Swords Talisman, Godfrey Icon, Shattered Stone, and the Two-Handed Sword Talisman are two very good new ones. And then for buffs and tiers, you want to grab all the elemental tiers, Flame, Lightning, Magic, and Holy, Thorny tier, Faith tier for buffs, of course. We have Golden Vow, Flame Grant Me Strength, Hellish Rebury is really good too if you have the Faith for it. These are great to experiment with. Thanks for watching this one. I hope you like my newest entry in the build crafting series for Milady. I know Milady's a really fun and popular weapon. I am one of those people that loves the moveset of the weapon. I kind of want to do one of these for the Fire Knight's Greatsword, but I'll see if that's something you guys want, and then I'll work on it if you do. If you're wondering why I didn't do Strength, you could do the same builds in Dexterity that you can in Strength. You'll just get the two-handed bonus, and you'll end up with a B in Strength anyway, so there's not too much difference there. I hope everybody enjoyed this video, and have a wonderful day.